Let's get into some other top stories that we are looking at for you today. This all coming as Anthropic has filed two federal lawsuits today against the Trump administration, alleging that Pentagon officials illegally retaliated against the company for its position on artificial intelligence safety. Defense Department officials last week designated Anthropic a supply chain risk, citing national security concerns. Let's continue to talk about this. I want to bring in attorney and legal analyst James Rubinowitz. Great to have you on, James. What do you make here of this lawsuit that was just filed today?
This is a really interesting lawsuit, Mike, and here's why. It's a lawsuit that is predicated on a law that has typically been directed at foreign adversaries, and that is what Pete Hegseth, that is what Donald Trump are both saying here. They're saying that Anthropic falls under the same category as foreign adversaries, and because of that, they're declaring Anthropic a supply chain risk. And as a result, Anthropic is now suing the government, saying that they are violating their First Amendment rights and are violating rights with a chilling effect to prevent other AI companies from doing deals with the government.
Yeah, this is such an interesting case here. We saw everything really break down last week, and then the Pentagon doubling down, tripling down on those statements. So going forward here, what does Anthropic have to do now to prove, to say, hey, this is not what the Pentagon is saying about us is true?
It's a very interesting thing because the argument that they're making is not a traditional First Amendment argument. They're saying that it isn't the traditional speech, assembly, or freedom of religion that we typically see in a First Amendment case. They're instead saying that it is contractual negotiating terms that fall under this umbrella of First Amendment rights. And what do I mean by that? Well, Anthropic is essentially saying that the guardrails that they tried to put into their contract by saying that the government shouldn't be allowed to use autonomous weapons, they shouldn't be able to use Claude or Anthropic for mass surveillance, and because of that, the government is now retaliating against them. So they essentially need to prove, Mike, that the comments that have been made by Pete Hegseth, who, as the Secretary of Defense, is given the powers to declare a company, this foreign adversary, this supply chain risk, that is what they are using to say that Anthropic is, in fact, ineligible to be used for government action.
Now, can we potentially see a counter lawsuit from the government? Because, I mean, Anthropic is pretty much saying that the government is using Claude as mass surveillance of Americans. I mean, that seems pretty big.
Well, it's an interesting thing because what Anthropic is essentially saying is we are okay with having government and military use of our AI and our technology. It is 99% of what Anthropic is used for in the government is actually non-autonomous weapons and non-mass surveillance. It is only that 1% that Anthropic is objecting to. So essentially, we might see the government try to bring a lawsuit against Anthropic and Claude, but I think the more powerful thing is what they've already done by declaring Claude and Anthropic that supply chain risk. The question is whether or not the judiciary is going to actually make that bright line in the sand and say, yes, Pete Hegseth, as the Secretary of Defense, is allowed to do this, and whether or not going forward, the government will be able to use this as a negotiating tactic to essentially allow them to use it for mass surveillance and autonomous weapons.
Isn't it a little bit of an awkward situation right now? Because even though that the government said, okay, we're going to start winding down Anthropic, I mean, in these next 60 days, they can still be using it, correct?
Exactly right. And in fact, they are still using it. Even while currently at battle and at war with Iran, they are using it every day. So even though it is Pete Hegseth's position that Claude and Anthropic are supply chain risks, they have done nothing to stop using Claude while intervening in the Middle East.
And is that because there just isn't another platform that the government can easily say, you know what, we don't want anything to do with Anthropic? Instead, they're saying, you know what, we don't want anything to do with Anthropic, but we still want to use you for the next 60 days. I mean, what is the competition like? Where is there much competition where the government can maybe pick somebody else?
The government absolutely can pick somebody else. And I'm sure you've also seen, Mike, that OpenAI and their chatbot, ChatGPT, which we're all familiar with, actually did make a deal with the government. And it was at a very interesting time, which was immediately after the government declared Anthropic this supply chain risk. And of course, there was a lot of backlash against OpenAI because of it. I think I saw that there have been more deletions from the App Store on Apple's iOS system than any other app in history since the government made that deal with OpenAI. And alternatively, Anthropic has made it from number 42 in the App Store to number 1 in the App Store since this deal has been made. So I think the question is whether or not OpenAI is going to be able to do the same thing Anthropic did for the government, because Claude has certainly proved to be a fantastic AI model.
There we go. Very interesting times we live in right now. James, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us. Fascinating right now. We'll see where it goes. Thanks so much.